Hi there, economists. All right, today we're going to be looking at the long run aggregate supply model. We talked about short run aggregate supply model and how similar it was to the microeconomic supply model. Long run has a bit of controversy, a bit of drama. There are actually two different schools of thought about how the shape of a long run aggregate supply model is. The first one is the new classical or monetarist model for long run aggregate supply. The other one is the Keynesian model of aggregate supply. And we're going to introduce both of them. The Keynesian model is based on the famous economist John Keynes. So they have different shapes, and a lot of the reasoning for it is due to the level of involvement the government should have in the economist's perspective into the economy. So the new classical long run aggregate supply model, these are people that we call supply side economists. In very simple terms, these guys believe that market forces are the best way to run an economy, that there should be very minimum government intervention when it comes to allocating resources. So the view of their model and the shape of it is that the long run aggregate supply curve is perfectly inelastic or pretty much vertical. And what we call, when we're at this level, we call that a full employment level of output. So that represents where the potential output of an economy is operating at complete full capacity. And you use YF for, obviously, full employment level of output. So that means all of your factors of production are being utilized to complete an absolute capacity. So this classical one, what it pretty much says is that the potential output is based entirely on the quantity and quality of the factors of production, not on the price level. So if the price goes from P1 to P2, it has absolutely no impact in your level of output, because it's the factors of production that will change your level of output, not the change in the prices. So the Keynesian method shaped very differently. You can see here that it comes in three different stages. So pretty much the difference between the long run and the short run are what the breaking point of production. So in the beginning, initially, phase one, you'll see that as you increase output, there are no increases in price. So this is a little bit almost like a perfectly elastic curve. So producers in an economy can raise their levels of output without really getting higher average costs. The reason why costs don't really go up, is that there's something called spare capacity. So there might be unemployed laborers that they can pick up. There might be extra resources lying around that they can use. So they've already incurred the cost of that. So to employ those won't raise your costs because it's spare resource. So this is region one here, and that's a result of having spare capacity. So despite increase in output, there's no increase in the average price levels. Phase two is where you start to see an incline in the price levels. This is when we're using up these spare capacity resources. So now all of a sudden you're having to pay higher prices for your factors of production. You're having to give more incentives for people to work for you because there's no more unemployed people just hanging out there chilling, waiting for a job. And eventually that leads us to full capacity, which is similar to the first model now, YF. And that's where it becomes perfectly inelastic. So you're back to your vertical curve. So this is the Keynesian aggregate supply curve. And that's how the diagram looks. So it turns into eventually the classical one, but it comes in phases due to this concept of having spare capacity in the economy. So what causes a shift? All right, as a country's factors of production are constantly changing, you're going to expect to see steady increases in the long run aggregate supply. So you can illustrate this with an outward shift in the long run aggregate supply. So that means that pretty much, actually there are two different things that can cause a shift, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But the way you demonstrate those on the two different curves, so if there's a shift on the Keynesian curve, this is how it'll look. So you're going to go from long run aggregate supply 1 to 2. So you'll see that there's a bit of an extension of spare capacity, because once again, we have more factors of production now. And then eventually it levels off. And likewise, you can see a shift from S1 to S2 in the classic model, the new classical perspective. All right. Now, might remind you actually of the production possibility curve that we talked about. An increase in productive potential is like increasing the long run aggregate supply curve. Because remember, this is a curve that demonstrated in a full economy where everything is being used. The amount of goods and services that are being consumed or available for consumption, and then the quantity of capital goods. So it pushes out your production possibility curve. So there's a link between production possibility curves and long-run aggregate supply. So why or how does this shift occur? It's very simple. There are two things that will cause it to occur: an improvement in the quality of the factors of production, or an increase in the quantity of the factors of production. A lot of that, the increase in quality and or quantity, can be created through improvements in technology. So technology is really critical to the supply side of any economy. So we're always looking at how the increase or improvement in technology is impacting the supply side. So I like this chart here because it kind of demonstrates the two different ways that a shift could occur in the long run aggregate supply curve for land, right? So all the resources, that's one of our factors of production. There could be an increase in quantity, right? You could discover new resources, a new island, a new area, a new type of resource that we've never used before. For an improvement of this, technology could allow us to access resources or discover new resources we didn't have before. So for example, like fracking, when they discovered fracking, it allowed them, although there's a lot of controversy on the impact of the environment, but it allowed them to access even more oil than they could before. Using things like fertilizers, irrigation systems helps you once again use and improve the quality of your natural resources because of advancements in technology. For the labor side, there could be an increase in birth rate, so that's an increase in quantity, or a decrease in the natural death rate. So it helps create more of a labor pool. At the same time, how do you improve quality? Things like education, training, apprenticeships. So either one of those could create a shift in the long run supply curve because the factor production of labor and entrepreneurship is improved. Finally, we have capital. So there could be more investment, more money going into things and projects, which would increase the supply, creating a shift in the supply curve. As well as technological advancements where more research and development being done could create a shift because now you're, once again, coming up with better sources of capital with improved equipment. And then maybe just more efficient use of capital. So, either one of those come from advancements. So you can see that either an increase in quantity or an increase in quality could help create a shift. A lot of the sources of the supply side change, they come naturally from market forces. So for example, you don't have to force people to go to school, but students are going to be attracted to becoming engineers and scientists or entrepreneurs because they get paid more. So naturally, they will then go and improve their education and some of those quality improvements that we saw for the labor side. Businesses, they want to earn a higher profit, therefore they're going to do R&D. They're going to invest more capital into research and development because that's how you earn more, profits. So you'll notice that a lot of this is market dictated. All right. However, regardless of that fact, governments still have a huge role to play in supply side. And we're going to be getting into now some supply side policies in the next video that show how the government try and create laws, rules, opportunities to increase the quantity or improve the quality of the factors of production. And there are two types of policies that governments can come about. Interventionalist policies and market-based policies. So you could probably guess which one is which and which one kind of works with which of the aggregate supply models. But we're going to get into that into a separate video because once again, I'm trying to keep these a bit shorter. All right, peace out, guys.